In 48 BC, the greatest library ever built supposedly went up in flames in a single night. It's one of history's most repeated stories, told in classrooms and documentaries for 2,000 years. It's also almost completely wrong. What really happened to the Library of Alexandria is a slower, stranger, and far more human story about how civilizations forget and how easily they let the people who remember for them disappear. Alexandria wasn't just a city, it was built as an idea, founded by Alexander the Great in 331 BC on a strip of Egyptian coastline, and turned by his successors, the Ptolemies, into the intellectual capital of the known world. Where other rulers built armies to conquer land, the Ptolemies built an institution to conquer knowledge itself. At its heart stood the Mouseion, a temple to the Muses, and attached to it, the library. Ptolemaic kings didn't just want the finest library in the Mediterranean. They wanted every book that had ever been written, in every language, gathered under one roof, so that nothing true or useful would ever be lost to time again. Legend says the Ptolemies ordered every ship docking in Alexandria's harbor searched, cargo hold to cargo hold. Any book found on board was confiscated, copied by hand, and only the copy handed back to its owner, the original kept for the library. It sounds almost like theft, and in a sense it was, but it was theft in service of preservation, on a scale no civilization had attempted before or has quite matched since. At its peak, estimates suggest the library held anywhere from 40,000 to 400,000 scrolls. Plays, mathematics, medicine, astronomy, philosophy, engineering, entire bodies of knowledge that exist nowhere else on Earth today, in any form, in any language. Whole schools of ancient thought survive now only as fragments quoted by other authors, because the originals never made it out of Alexandria before it was too late. Scholars like Euclid, Archimedes, and Eratosthenes, the man who calculated the Earth's circumference using nothing but shadows, sticks, and geometry, all worked within these walls. This wasn't just a building full of shelves. It was humanity's memory, deliberately concentrated in one place, tended by generations of scholars who saw themselves as caretakers of something larger than any single lifetime. Here's where the popular story kicks in. 48 BC, Julius Caesar is in Alexandria, caught up in a civil war for the Egyptian throne between Cleopatra and her brother. To stop enemy ships from trapping his fleet in the harbor, Caesar orders the ships burned. The fire spread from the docks toward the city. Ancient writers claim it reached warehouses storing books, possibly library overflow waiting to be cataloged, possibly unrelated stock. Historians still argue about which. This is the moment popular history freezes the frame and calls it the burning of the library, as if the story ended right there. But here's the problem. Multiple ancient sources describe the library and its scholars still very much active for centuries after this fire. Whatever burned that night in 48 BC, it clearly wasn't the whole collection, and it wasn't the end. In fact, 400 years later, one of history's greatest minds was still walking these halls, still teaching, still adding to what the library had preserved. Her name was Hypatia. Hypatia was a mathematician, an astronomer, a philosopher, one of the last people alive who truly understood everything the library still held, across disciplines that most scholars by then only knew in isolated pieces. Students traveled from across the Roman Empire just to sit in her lectures on geometry and the movement of the stars. Through her, whatever was left of the old flame was still burning, still being passed hand to hand. But the world around her was changing, and not gently. Rome, now ruling Egypt directly, was far less interested in funding Greek scholarship than the Ptolemies had ever been. Wars, political riots, and escalating religious conflict between pagans and Christians were eating away at Alexandria block by block, and the library, and the kind of open, questioning knowledge it represented, was no longer protected by anyone who valued it enough to fight for it. In 415 AD, that tension turned fatal. Hypatia was dragged from her chariot by a mob in the street and killed. Not for any crime, but for representing a kind of knowledge and authority the mob no longer trusted from someone like her. She was one of the last true voices of the library's original spirit. After her death, the silence around what remained of it grew louder, year after year, until barely anyone was left who remembered what had once been there. This matters because the popular story, one villain, one fire, one dramatic night, lets everyone else off the hook. The real story is uglier and more familiar. Knowledge doesn't just get destroyed by armies marching through a city. It gets destroyed by neglect, by shrinking budgets, by indifference, and sometimes by fear of the very people who carry it. We'll never know exactly what disappeared with her and with the institution she represented. Entire plays by Sophocles and Euripides we now only know by title, mentioned in passing by someone who once actually read them. Complete star catalogs, gone. Medical texts describing surgical techniques that weren't rediscovered by European science for over 1,000 years, quietly lost somewhere between one century and the next. Some historians believe that if her generation of scholars had been allowed to keep working undisturbed, protected, funded, left alone to think, the scientific revolution might have arrived 1,000 years sooner than it did. We can't prove that. History doesn't run experiments. But looking at how much was already known and how long it took the world to rediscover it, we can't rule it out either. The Library of Alexandria didn't fall to one fire on one night. It fell every single time someone in power decided that knowledge, or the people who held it, simply weren't worth protecting anymore. Hypatia is just the one name from that long, slow ending that history happened to remember. The Library of Alexandria didn't die in a single night, whatever the popular version tells you. It died over centuries. One budget cut, one riot, one silenced scholar at a time. So gradually that no one alive at any single moment could have named the exact day it was truly gone. If Hypatia's story surprised you, subscribe, because the real history is almost always stranger and sadder than the legend everyone already believes.